Hi, so this is my mind map and summary of focus by Daniel Goleman. So the first part of this is focus requires your attention, right? And in this book, Daniel talks about the impact of technology. So um, he's saying that on average, teenagers send 100 texts per day, and he's even witnessed a teenager texting while they're riding a bike. He gives an example of a mother just completely ignoring her daughter because she was on her mobile phone. He gave an example of 9 sorority sisters who are basically sitting down in restaurants and just ignoring each other. And then another example of a teacher saying that her students weren't reading like they used to. And the comment there is, why would they read when they're competing with the World of Warcraft? So a couple of ideas then: put your phone away. What are distractions costing us as a society? And then Daniel believes that attention is the number one issue in today's workforce because of skimming emails, voice messages, and memos. And there's a great quote that he says here: "Wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." So moving on to the basics. Being able to concentrate or to focus is being able to ignore everything around you. So there's a sensory side of it where you avoid noises and smells and distractions around you. And then there's also emotional. The emotional side, when if someone mentions your name, you immediately focus on that. And then on the emotional side, it's stuff like having a recent breakup. So distraction equals poor performance. And there was a study done of anxiety and students' anxiety and their results, and definitely the students with high anxiety performed worse. So managing your emotions is also important. And in fact, Daniel says it's essential for your well-being. So, if you have a sense of helplessness, hopelessness, self-pity, and obsessive compulsive, these are just some of the items that he mentions that basically are saying that you're not able to control the emotional side of your brain and focus. So where this all comes from is your brain's prefrontal region. So that's where you're able to block everything out and to dampen down the emotional factors that are distracting you. So Daniel talks about multitasking, and what he actually says is multitasking is really splitting your attention rapidly from one thing to the other. So your brain can only really concentrate on one thing at a time. So if you are multitasking, what you're actually doing is just splitting your attention. And that continual splitting saps your attention, so you're not able to concentrate for as long. What I like to say with multitasking is it's doing two things badly. So basically, when you fully engage and concentrate on something, they call it the flow. So, and then Daniel reckons most of the time people are either stressed or bored. To get to the flow, we need to align what we do with what we enjoy. So flow is when a task challenges our abilities, and it's something that we're passionate about. And then focus is like the ignition, like starting a car. It's the spark that starts the fire. So most of the workforce are bored, and to engage them, we need to up their motivation, and enthusiasm, give them a sense of purpose, and put a little bit of pressure on them. So frazzle is when you're really stressed, and you've got cortisol and adrenaline pumping through your body, and then this leads to basically the state leads to burnout eventually. So top to bottom is about your top brain and your bottom brain. In terms of getting a breakthrough, often these happen when you're taking time off. So Daniel gives an example of a mathematician who was working on a problem for 4 years that he couldn't solve, and then he went for a walk along the beach, and suddenly the solution came to him, and came suddenly and with immediate certainty. So that's your subconscious, or the bottom part of your brain, working on a problem. And then often what it takes to get that solution to surface is just taking some time off, so having a break. So your bottom brain is the subconscious brain. It's fast, involuntary, and impulsive. So once you've done something, it becomes routine, and then it's taken over by your bottom brain. So Daniel gives an example here of when an athlete or someone's doing one of their events, they really need to rely on their bottom brain and not try and use their top brain while they're in that event. So he gives an example of Lola Jones. She was winning 100-meter hurdles, and when she knocked the first one and failed was when she started to think about her technique. So Daniel says, using your top brain or thinking about something in the middle of an event is a recipe for screw up. In terms of cognitive bias modification, it's probably best to Google this. It's a way of reducing your social anxiety. So it's about flashing crowds quickly on the screen past you, and the people in the crowds being non-threatening, and then that kind of lowers your social anxiety. So hijacks to our attention, and then this is the emotional side of the brain where something hijacks your attention. And so people that are good at calming themselves down, that's all about your top brain, and it's essential for your well-being and for work and relationships. So your top brain is slower, voluntary, and effortful. It's where you manage your self-control, and it can learn. So and then he talks about digital overload wears out your self-control. And so he gives a study up where there's a link to the rise in obesity in the US with computers. So when computers came around, people start getting more obese. So emotional resilience can be strengthened with practice, and it's all about your top brain. So mind wandering can have positive outcomes, can result in creative thinking, inventions, and original thinking. So really that's this link to this breakthrough part of your bottom brain. So you need to capture the great ideas that you have with focus. So if you want a formula of how to try and use your subconscious brain to come up with a creative solution, you have to immerse yourself with all the inputs. So the example of the mathematician working for 4 years on the solution, you have to have selective attention on the specific creative challenge, and then you have to just have an open awareness of what you're thinking about and be able to capture that idea when it comes to you. So to get some insights, he suggests a long bath or a walk or taking a holiday. So finding the balance here. So too much mind wandering is a negative thing, and it can lead to negative self-talk and worry. This is actually a a great solution here. It's but basically what you do is you ask someone to subtract 7 from 100, and then this forces them to stop the negative self-talk in their head. So I've used this strategy quite effectively with my young daughter when she was really upset, and after 4 or 5 of these, she'd completely calm down. So that's a really good solution there. And then the other solution and kind of the underlying message behind this whole book is about meditation and mindfulness, and that's a way to improve our focus and help us deal with emotional problems and regulate and be able to have better self-control. So intense concentration fatigues your mental faculties. So the best thing to do is to take a rest. And Daniel's solution or suggestion is it's better to have a rest within nature, overlooking maybe a lake or a mountain range or something like that, and not playing video games or doing emails. In terms of an inner rudder, so Daniel gives us an example of George Lucas, who obviously started Star Wars. And so when early on in George's career, he was wanting to make these movies, but the production companies were trying to steer him in a different direction. He actually just went out on his own and started Star Wars. And so if he'd followed those production companies' leads, we would probably never have Star Wars. So it takes a great deal of self-control to know to know what you want and to pursue what you want, despite people trying to distract you and take you off direction. So self-awareness. This is actually an extremely important concept, and mainly revolves around feedback. So most people people are not self-aware until they get feedback from someone. So 360-degree evaluations are really good in a business perspective. And one of the interesting facts that Daniel says here is that the low-level employees are much better at aligning what they think they're good at with feedback that they get from others, whereas managers and managers and executives are less self-aware of their strengths and weaknesses. So you can look up Bill George. He takes a course at Harvard Business School, and he calls it True North groups. That's something you could look into a bit further. Performance feedback. So some interesting things here. Negative feedback in a positive tone, people still leave positive, whereas positive feedback in a cold distance tone, people leave negative. And then Daniel uses a lot of examples about doctors with their patients. So often doctors can be quite blunt and uncompassionate when they speak to their patients. So a good way for them to get feedback on how they're talking to their patients is to take a recording and then play back their audio. And then the financial industry is notoriously bad for being self-aware. The whole industry rewards luck as if it was skill. And when Daniel or others have tried to tell top executives in the financial industry that this is what they were doing, they just ignored them and paid no attention. So in terms of a recipe for self-control, there's this marshmallow test they do to younger children to see if they can withstand eating a marshmallow that's put in front of them for 4 minutes. And the study showed that the children that could withstand eating the marshmallow perform much better in later life. So the ones that were able to not eat the marshmallow basically distracted themselves. So they think of the cookie or the marshmallow as something else. They think of how many they can get in the future, or they think it's just a picture with a frame around it. So different ways of distracting themselves and forcing self-control. In terms of anxiety, so something we need to try and do is to be self-aware enough that we're anxious and that we need to do something about it. So in terms of teaching executive skills, teaching executive skills to preschoolers makes them more likely to do well than IQ. So when we're talking executive skills here, we're talking about managing your emotions. It's about your top brain. In terms of the empathy triad, there's cognitive empathy, which is top down, so your top brain. And so an example here of a successful executive, I always just wanted to learn everything, to understand anyone I was around, why they thought what they did, why they did what they did, what worked for them, what didn't. And empathetic concern. So some examples here are, the examples here are doctors with their patients. I already mentioned this. And then this is just a really great tip for life, is to look people in the eye. That way you can better tell what they're actually saying and how they're feeling. And so you really want to be able to acknowledge people's feelings and show concern. And then emotional empathy is bottom up. So this is, from your subconscious, you just notice, for example, that someone's upset by the look on their face. In terms of social sensitivity, so some inappropriate examples of people being inappropriate. So not getting the cue to stop talking. So you all know those people that just carry on talking and talking and talking, and no matter how many times you give them a cue that you want them to stop, they just carry on going. So they're not socially aware and of different cues. So Prince Philip is a good example. And when they first went to meet the Nigerian president, he made some comment about what was he doing in his pajamas or something, whereas that was their traditional dress. And then example of workers being accused of sexual harassment and just being astounded that they're actually being accused and not really knowing what it was that they did to be accused. And then mindfulness can help. So as I've said, the underlying thing to this book is mindfulness is a very good way to improve your focus and to be able to improve your all sorts of things like your social awareness in this example. This Theatre of the Oppressed was an interesting one. It was, the example here is about, and this is an actual program that someone runs. You can probably just Google this and find out more about it. But the example in the book is an illegal Mexican day laborer and basically doing work for someone and then not being paid at the end of the day. And then you get other people to act out the scenario for him and then for him to see how badly he really is being oppressed. So when you see it through other people, it can really be impactful for you to appreciate the situation. Then, in general, the book tends to suggest that richer people are less attentive and more indifferent to other people's needs, and poorer people are much more attentive to people's needs and understand what they're feeling. So just took a pause there and opened up the second part. So I've called this focus part 2. So the next concept here is systems thinking, and some examples of this are the flow of coins. So Daniel gives an example of someone who's able to trace coins and how society worked 100, 200, 500 years ago, basically by following coins in the different areas. And then another example of systems thinking is water systems and where water flows, where it goes, epidemics and flu outbreaks. That all of solving these types of problems requires systems thinking. So questions you can ask in terms of the data around systems are we defining the right problem? Do we have the right data? And does the model that we're making map reality? So systems blindness. So the example Daniel gives here is wayfinding, which is actually a way of finding islands that the islanders used. And they're starting to lose their ability to do this because of technology. With GPS and what have you, you don't really need to be able to know how to find your way. Whereas in the olden days, people could find their way just by looking at the currents and the stars and various other ways to find their way from island to island. In terms of solving systems problems, it often needs all the players to come together. So the example here was magazine publishers, and the problem was that almost 50% of magazines weren't ever being sold, so that was a huge amount of waste. And it took bringing all the players together, so publishers and outlets, and it took them talking to each other to solve this problem. So often you can't solve system problems by yourself. You need multiple different players to be able to work together. So some examples of solving system problems is like road traffic and climate change. And then your bottom-up brain can't detect and react to systems-based problems because something like climate change is happening so slowly in the background that our subconscious minds just can't really detect it or acknowledge it. So it really requires top-down thinking to solve systems-based problems. The other suggestion to solve the system problem is to have a positive frame around it. So people in the long run tend to pay less attention to negative and painful ideas. So as an example of climate change, people threatening that the world is going to be destroyed, for example, might get your attention in the short term, but in the long term, it's not going to work. So Daniel's example here is a company called handprinted.com, which helps you identify your footprint and what you can do to improve it. So it has a positive frame. Games are really good at teaching system thinking. The 10,000 hour fallacy. So the test at 10,000 hour idea is that that's how many hours it requires to become a superstar at something, like the best tennis player in the world. So Daniel gives an example of Susan Butcher now. I don't know how to pronounce this, but Iditarod race. This is basically a race, I think, in the North Pole, where it's like a 4-day race, and it's your sled with your dogs. Basically, what Susan Butcher did is she changed it to 6-hour shifts, and she was always preparing and improving what she did. And she actually won this race 4 times in a row. And at the time, it was mainly a men-dominated race, and typically they did 12 hours and then rested. And so her ability to focus and concentrate and keep on improving helped her win this race 4 times, and she changed people's minds about the best way to do this race. So the idea here is that it's not necessarily just about doing 10,000 hours. It's about making continual improvements over those 10,000 hours. So practice. So the example here is golf swing. Practicing the same bad swing for 10,000 hours. That's not going to help you. So you get the benefit when you adjust your execution over and over. You tweak the system by continually pushing and changing things. So often, and this is why all top athletes have a coach, is that a coach is someone that can help you make those improvements. So it really requires, it's not just 10,000 hours, it's training over months and years and giving the training your full concentration and making continual improvements. So talking about smart practice, you need a feedback loop. You need to identify errors and correct them. And learning to improve requires a top-down focus. So you need to be thinking about what you're doing, and you can't just rely on the subconscious mind taking over and doing something. You have to keep on thinking about how you can improve. So the idea here is after 50 hours, you don't need to do. You can start doing things automatically, like driving a car. But yeah, I'm just reiterating this point that improving requires continued focus and avoiding bottom-up automation. So meditation, which is I think the underlying kind of key point behind this whole book, is that it trains your ability to concentrate for longer. So it's pretty important. So in terms of positivity, Daniel gives the idea here that Larry David, he just had 50,000 fans like screaming, shouting, and praising him, and then one that said that he sucked, and that kind of all he could think about was one person that said that he sucked rather than the 50,000 fans. So negativity focuses your mind on yourself, whereas positivity opens your mind to possibility. So really, you need your top-down brain to, if you do get hijacked like Larry David was, to kind of calm yourself down and then reframe your mind to be positive, so you can think about possibilities around you. So a good way to think positively is to ask yourself this question: if everything worked out perfectly in life, what would you be doing in 10 years' time? So that helps you focus about what could work in your life and where you could be in 10 years. In terms of high-performing teams, you need the right ratio of positive to negative feelings. So the ideal ratio was 2.9 positive to 1 negative, and yeah, this can work both ways. You can have, if it's more negative, so it's 2 negative to 1 positive, then that's bad. But also if it's like 10 positive and no negative, then that's bad as well. So it needs the right ratio here. And then what can help high performing teams is having, dreams coming first. What are you dreaming about achieving? In terms of gaming, so Daniel gives an example of someone called Daniel Gates, who was he started playing games when he was very young, and then he became a poker champion online and made millions. But basically, he was socially inept, so he spent so much time in front of a computer that he never developed any social skills to actually talk and interact with people. So games are good for certain brain functions, but limit the growth of other brain functions. So the idea here, I guess, for parents is don't let your kids play too many computer games. They need to also learn to be social. So then there's some games like this game called Tenacity where you tap your fingers while breathing, and you also do double tapping. So you're playing a game, but you're also learning to focus. So if you're a parent and you're looking for a game to give your kids that will teach them to focus, then look up Tenacity. So this example of breathing buddies is basically schools in the New York City Spanish Harlem, which is this is not the best area in New York. It's quite a dangerous area. And I think Daniel gave the example of when they walk into school, they actually have to go through gun detectors and that kind of stuff. So what these kids did at school is they did regular breathing and mindfulness exercises, and this really helped the whole school to be really calm and really focused on their work. So this is another strategy for kids. It's red is stop and calm down, amber is think about strategies and feelings, green try a strategy. So this is a way to get kids to try and regulate their emotions. And then this biodot, so you can Google this, tells you when you're getting too anxious. In terms of leadership, a leader's primary task is to direct the focus of the entire organization. And an example here is with Apple. When Steve Jobs came back into Apple after he'd been fired, he got the whole team to focus on just 4 products, whereas they were working on over 100 products. So he got them to shelve 96 products and just focus on 4. And from that point, everyone knows how Apple succeeded. So deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. In terms of strategy, it requires creativity and insight and outer focus, systems thinking, and ability to communicate with passion and skill. So an example here of Intel and BlackBerry. So the quote here from the CEO of Intel is only the paranoid survive. And then I think everyone knows what happened with BlackBerry with their phones. And because they didn't innovate and keep up with iPhones and Android phones, they ended up losing a huge amount of market share. So they didn't have a good outer focus of what the market was wanting. So leaders triple focus, and kind of spoke about 3 things so far. A leader needs good system thinking, social to be socially astute, and also to be able to focus. So the example here, Steve Tuttleman, he reads 26 magazines and multiple news publications, and then his decisions, excuse me, to invest in things are a gut feeling, and that's because he's got a broader view, basically because he reads so much and he's so aware of what's going on. So you need to be an expert, and you need to have high self-awareness. So the triple focus, as I was saying, is an inner, other, and outer focus. So those are the 3 things leaders need to be strong at to be good leaders. So inspirational leaders have good self-awareness, so inner focus, good communication, so other focus, and then attentive listening, which is outer focus. Pacesetters are the type of leaders that don't listen. They command and demand obedience. They want to rewrite your reports. They're highly critical. They micromanage, and basically they create a toxic environment. And they have a lack of empathy. So you can think of an example of a leader that's pacesetter that hasn't really developed the self-control and focus to be a good leader. In terms of leaders, so IQ is not the best indicator of whether a leader is going to be a good leader. A much more effective idea of whether, or things to measure to tell whether a leader will be good, is their self-discipline, empathy, and persuasion. So an informal leader is the leader who people believe is the most influential. So this is not necessarily the leader with the title, but in some cases this could be someone within a team that everyone really listens to, rather than whoever the person with the title is. So successful leaders have this triple focus, and they're well balanced. You can't have too much empathy, for example. So in terms of goal setting versus social scanning, which are 2 different parts of the brain, good leaders are able to quickly cycle between these 2 different parts of the brain to engage people and then see how they're responding. In terms of qualities of good leaders, listening within to create an authentic vision that motivates people, coaching, so listening, paying attention and showing concern, listening to advice and being collaborative, and celebrating wins and laughing. All right, that's everything I have on the book Focus by Daniel Goleman. I hope you found this mind map and summary useful. Thank you.